The first time Orson Nealy brought his dog to the interplanetary clinic, he had no idea he was going to traumatize an alien. It was a blue morning in Elko, Nevada, the kind that looked like someone had scrubbed the sky clean overnight. Orson parked his beat-up truck outside the newly opened Xeno Veterinary Care and Mutual Pet Healing Center, stared at the oddly shimmering sign, and turned to his passenger. "All right, Buck, no biting, no growling. No peeing on anything unless you really mean it." Buck, a 70-pound mutt with the energy of a caffeinated coyote and the bark of a diesel engine, wagged his tail and barked sharply, as if to say, "I make no promises." Orson climbed out, opened the passenger door, and Buck launched out like a missile. He hit the ground, circled twice, and then stopped, ears pricked at the front door of the clinic. Orson jogged after him, leash in hand but failing to actually attach it. The front lobby was immaculate too immaculate. It looked like a hotel lobby designed by someone who had never seen a dog, let alone cleaned up after one. The floors were pale green, the walls shimmered with a faint lavender hue, and the receptionist was a floating orb with eyelashes. Before Orson could say a word, a door slid open and a tall, pale creature entered. It was 7 feet tall and vaguely amphibian, with a long neck, large dark eyes, and skin that shimmered like fish scales. It wore a teal uniform with a silver badge on the chest that read Dr. Vesh, Doctor. Vesh took one look at Buck, who immediately started barking loud enough to make an earthquake jealous and backed up fast. Orson clapped his hands. "He's just saying hello." Dr. Vesh froze against the wall, one hand raised in a defensive gesture. Is that vocalization typical of a greeting?" the alien asked, voice warbling like a cello underwater. "Yup," Orson said, grabbing Buck's collar. "He does it to the mailman, the pizza guy, my mother-in-law. Look, he's wagging his tail. He likes you. He appears to be attempting to rupture my auditory membranes. He's just excited." Dr. Vesh looked at Buck with the same expression a man might give a chainsaw that had just turned itself on. After a long moment, Vesh took a cautious step forward. "Let us proceed to the examination chamber." Orson nodded and led Buck down the hallway, which was lined with softly glowing panels and smelled faintly of mint and something like old socks. Buck sniffed every corner with intense suspicion. Inside the chamber, the walls adjusted to a soft blue as they entered. There were no metal tables, no overhead lights, just a platform made of what looked like clouds. Vesh gestured. "Please place the canine on the comfort levitator." Orson hoisted Buck up. Buck immediately jumped off. "Sir, I require the animal to remain still." "Good luck with that," Orson muttered, trying again. This time he managed to get Buck to stay by offering a piece of dried jerky. Dr. Vesh approached cautiously, instruments hovering beside him like obedient fireflies. Buck growled low in his throat. Orson stepped in. "Easy, Buck, he's a doctor, just let him take a look." Vesh extended a scanning wand. Buck snarled. "I assure you," Vesh said, "this tool is harmless." "Try talking to him," Orson suggested. "Tell him what you're doing," Vesh blinked. "Communicate with the canine?" "Yeah. I mean, he might not understand the words, but the tone helps." Vesh turned back to Buck and spoke in a slow, careful tone. "Greetings, mammalian quadruped. I will now initiate non-invasive diagnostics." Buck growled louder. "You sound like you're announcing an autopsy," Orson said. "Try it like this." He stepped forward, scratched behind Buck's ears, and said, "Hey buddy, it's okay, Doc's just gonna check your tummy." "Good boy." Vesh mimicked the tone but stumbled on the words. "Hello, friend creature, I am. Good Doc, I will touch." "Tummy now." Buck looked confused but stopped growling. Vesh leaned in and waved the wand. Lights flickered. A soft hum filled the room. "Curious," Vesh muttered. "What's curious?" Orson asked. "There is a dense object lodged in the animal's lower intestinal tract," Orson groaned. "He eats rocks. Been doing that since he was a pup." "Rocks?" "Yup, granite mostly, sometimes quartz. Vet back home said he's just weird." Vesh tapped on his tablet. "This may explain the digestive irregularities." "Yeah, he's been farting like a diesel engine." Vesh tilted his head. I do not understand the metaphor, but I believe I comprehend the situation. Buck wagged his tail and sneezed. Vesh flinched again but held his ground. Orson chuckled. He likes you now. I remain unconvinced. The exam concluded without violence, though Buck did attempt to chew on one of the floating instruments. Orson signed a data pad, took a bag of alien-designed dog treats that looked like purple packing peanuts, and left with Buck trotting beside him, tail high. As they reached the truck, Vesh followed them out, still watching Buck like he might explode. Why do you persist in maintaining companionship with such an unpredictable creature? Vesh asked. Orson opened the truck door. Because he's loyal and protective. And yeah, he's loud and a little nuts, but he'd die for me. That means something? Vesh stood there silent as Buck hopped into the truck and barked at a passing cloud. Over the next weeks, Orson and Buck became regulars. Buck had allergies, a chipped tooth, and a weird rash that turned out to be from rolling in alien fertilizer. Each visit, Vesh learned to stand a little closer, to speak a little softer, and to trust that the barking wasn't a declaration of war. One afternoon, Orson arrived with Buck limping badly. He stepped in a gopher hole chasing a jackrabbit, Orson said, lifting the dog carefully out of the truck bed. Yelped like I shot him. Inside the clinic, Vesh examined the leg with practiced hands and a quiet focus. We must perform a scan. There may be ligament damage. Orson nodded. Do it. Buck lay still during the scan, a rarity. Vesh reviewed the data. The joint is swollen but not structurally compromised. I will administer anti-inflammatory gel and recommend restricted movement for 7 cycles. 7 days. Yes. Good. I was worried it was worse. A few minutes later, Buck was licking peanut butter off a spoon while Vesh applied the gel. For a creature so volatile, Vesh said, he displays surprising trust. He knows when someone's helping him. Vesh paused. I have begun to understand your species' emotional investment in these animals. Yeah, you thinking of getting a dog? I do not believe I am ready. Well, let's start small. Try petting him. Vesh hesitated, then extended his hand. Buck sniffed it, sneezed, and leaned into the touch. Vesh didn't back away. That was the moment things changed. Orson started bringing Buck in even when he wasn't sick. Vesh began studying Earth canine behavior, trying to understand the logic behind barking at mailboxes or rolling in dead lizards. He never quite got there, but he tried. One day, Orson showed up with a different problem. Buck won't eat, he said, eyes tight with worry. Hasn't touched his food in 2 days. Vesh ran tests, scanned, poked, and prodded. There is a small obstruction in the upper digestive tract. It may pass, but we must monitor closely. Can I stay with him? Of course. Orson spent the night in the clinic, curled up on a floor cushion with Buck's head on his lap. Vesh checked in every hour. The next morning, Buck vomited up a half-eaten sock. Orson cried, not much, just enough. Vesh didn't say anything. He just handed over a warm towel. By the end of the month, Buck was back to full strength. Orson brought Vesh a 6-pack of root beer and a hand-drawn thank you card signed with a paw print. You're part of the pack now, Orson said. Vesh accepted the gift with a stunned look. I have never been part of a pack. Well, Orson said, clapping him on the shoulder, you are now. And Buck, true to form, barked at him. Vesh backed away. Orson clapped. He's just saying hello. The power went out halfway through the teeth cleaning. Dr. Vesh stood frozen, mouth slightly open, an ultrasonic scaler hovering an inch from Buck's molars. The room dimmed to a soft emergency glow, and the humming instruments gave one last sputter before falling silent. Buck, lying sedated on the levitation cushion, let out a long, groggy sigh and licked the air. Orson, seated nearby with his arms crossed and an expression that suggested he'd seen this sort of thing before, quietly uncrossed his arms. That normal? He asked. Lights cutting out mid-procedure. Vesh didn't look away from the dog. The backup systems should have activated. They have not. Is this a problem? I am not in a position to answer that confidently. Orson stood and peeked into the hallway. The overhead panels had gone dark and only thin strips of bioluminescence lit the floor. Somewhere distant, a klaxon gave a half-hearted wheeze and died. "You folks use solar?" he asked. "Primarily photonic conversion arrays, yes." Storm rolling in. Dust. "Might have covered your collectors." Vesh looked at him, blinking. "That is a possibility we did not account for." "Don't worry," Orson said, already pulling a multitool from his back pocket. "You got a ladder. We possess a vertical access platform. Even better." By the time Vesh led him up through a cylindrical service shaft to the roof, the wind had picked up. Orson squinted through the airborne grit, then pointed at the solar array. There, coated in red clay. "No wonder your system's choked. Got a hose. We utilize vaporized cleaning cycles." "Right, and I'm guessing that needs power." Vesh nodded slowly. Orson rubbed his hands together and stepped toward the panels. "Well, good thing I brought my own elbow grease." He pulled a rag from his back pocket, spat into it, and started wiping the panels one by one. Vesh observed from a safe distance. "Is oral fluid truly effective as a cleaning agent?" "No," Orson said, scrubbing harder. "But it's available." The wind picked up again, flapping the corners of Orson's jacket. Vesh steadied himself against a support beam, watching as the human methodically cleared each panel. After several minutes, a faint hum returned beneath their feet. "There she goes," Orson said, stepping back. "Should be enough juice to run your machines again. We are indebted." "Nah, Buck's got half a mouth of gunk. You're the one doing me the favor." Less than 10 minutes later, they were back in the clinic. The equipment flickered back to life and the scaler buzzed again. Buck snored softly as Vesh resumed cleaning his teeth. "I have never required a client's assistance to restore operational functionality," Vesh said. "Well," Orson said, settling back into the chair, "you never had a client raised on a cattle ranch with an unreliable generator." Buck twitched once, then farted audibly. Vesh paused. "Is that a sign of distress?" Orson didn't even blink. "That's just him saying he's comfortable." Later that afternoon, as Buck recovered in a side room lined with calming light panels and what appeared to be sand that rearranged itself into soothing patterns, Vesh brought Orson a cup of something purple and steaming. "It is a root infusion. Calming, non-toxic to humans." Orson sniffed it. "Smells like warm beets and regret." Vesh sat across from him. "I have been compiling data on human environmental coping mechanisms." "You mean how we deal with stuff breaking constantly?" "In a manner of speaking, yes." "Trial and error," Orson said. "Mostly error. But every now and then, we hit the right combination of duct tape and hope." Vesh tapped his tablet. "I have observed that your species engages in direct action even in the absence of formal training." "Well, we don't always wait around for someone to tell us whether it's a good idea. Sometimes you just grab a wrench and see what happens. Statistically, that should result in more fatalities." "Oh, it does," Orson said, sipping the infusion and grimacing, "but we learn fast, sometimes real fast." There was a pause. Vesh studied him. "You are not a technician, nor a biologist. Yet you engaged with our power system, administered assistance to a non-native animal, and have now consumed an unknown beverage without hesitation." Orson shrugged. "You fix what's in front of you. Then you get back to whatever else you were doing." At that moment, the door to the side room opened and Buck stumbled out, tongue lolling. He made a beeline for Orson, tail wagging weakly. "Still groggy," Orson said, kneeling. "Come here, you big idiot." Buck collapsed into his lap. Vesh tilted his head. "He appears to trust physical proximity as the primary indicator of safety." "Yeah," Orson said, scratching behind the dog's ear. "We're kind of like that too." 2 days later, Orson returned not with Buck, but with a battered-looking metal box clutched under one arm. "I brought you a gift." Vesh eyed the box. "Is it alive?" "Nope, it's a generator, old diesel but reliable. Thought you might need a backup next time the dust gets thick." Vesh walked around it slowly. "You are offering us an engine that combusts refined hydrocarbons?" "Yup. That is extremely inefficient," Sure is, but it'll run when the sun doesn't. Vesh crouched beside it, examining the knobs and dials. We lack infrastructure for fuel storage. I brought a tank. You anticipated our refusal. I anticipated your confusion. Vesh stood again. I lack the authority to accept unsolicited combustion devices. Well, I already bolted it to the side of the clinic, so you may as well use it. There was a long silence as Vesh calculated the bureaucratic ramifications. I will. Classify it as a temporary contingency measure pending further review. That's the spirit. That evening, they stood outside under a sky streaked with orange and violet. Buck lay nearby chewing on a stick he'd stolen from the landscaping. Orson leaned on the fence that bordered the parking lot while Vesh adjusted the generator valve. You ever think about getting off-world? Orson asked. I have visited 12 other planets. Earth is the most volatile. Yeah, but it keeps you guessing. That is not typically regarded as a positive trait in planetary environments, Orson chuckled. You folks ever figure out why dogs wag their tails? We have hypotheses, none conclusive. Well, here's mine, Orson said. When something makes you happy, you don't think about it, you just show it. Vesh glanced down at Buck, who was now rolling in a pile of gravel with apparent joy. And yet, Vesh said, he appears to lack any sense of self-preservation. Another thing we've got in common. Vesh turned back toward the clinic. I must document the generator installation before my shift ends. I'll help you file it under unofficial anomaly. As they walked back inside, Buck followed, tail swinging like a metronome set to pure contentment. Buck was pacing. Orson watched him from the corner of the exam room, arms folded, foot tapping a slow rhythm against the polished floor. The dog's nails clicked with each lap around the room, his tail stiff, ears twitching at sounds only he seemed to register. He does not appear to be in pain, Vesh observed, tablet in hand, but his behavior implies sustained discomfort or elevated stress response. Orson sighed. He's been like this since yesterday. Started whining in the truck, refused breakfast, and ripped apart my recliner cushion. Thought maybe he swallowed something again, but he's not bloated. Vesh knelt beside Buck, who paused long enough to sniff the alien's elbow before continuing his loop. Has his environment changed recently? I moved the couch, Orson said. That's it. Vesh looked up. Which direction? Orson blinked. To the west wall. Sun kept hitting my eyes during reruns. That may be relevant. I doubt he's mad about interior feng shui. Vesh stood and adjusted the room's lighting. Canines are known to be sensitive to positional shifts in familiar territories. In some species, this triggers nesting distress. He's not a parrot. He is also not behaving like a healthy dog. Buck stopped pacing long enough to sit, scratch his ear violently, sneeze, and then resume his circuit. Vesh typed something into the tablet, then approached a wall panel. A soft chime echoed as he pressed a recessed button. The panel shifted open, revealing a narrow drawer of diagnostic tools. Without speaking, Vesh retrieved a flat rectangular device and held it near Buck's midsection as the dog passed. A low pulse of blue light flickered across the scanner. No foreign bodies, Vesh said after a moment. Stomach contents are unremarkable, trace protein, fiber, and a large quantity of synthetic stuffing. That'd be the recliner cushion. Vesh nodded once, then activated another tool. This one emitted a faint clicking noise like a tiny engine trying to start. Buck stopped and stared at it. Salivary cortisol levels are elevated, Vesh said. He's stressed. Yeah, but why? Vesh didn't answer immediately. Instead, he tapped on the tablet, frowning at the results. Heart rate remains within acceptable parameters. Pupillary response is normal. No indication of infection or toxin. He's not sick. Not physically. Orson exhaled slowly. So what? He's depressed. Possibly. Or experiencing anxiety. Over a couch. There may be compounding factors. Buck finally collapsed onto the floor with a dramatic groan. He rolled onto his side and covered his snout with one paw. Orson crouched beside him. All right, buddy. "What's eating you?" Buck thumped his tail once, then went still. Vesh sat on the edge of a nearby bench. "Have there been any changes in your behavior, routine disruptions, absences?" "I left for a funeral last weekend," Orson said. "Was gone 2 nights. Neighbor fed him. When I got back, he wouldn't look at me." Vesh glanced up. "Did you engage in any farewell rituals before departing?" "I told him I'd be back." "That may not have been sufficient." "I brought him a squeaky cactus when I got back. Emotional repair requires more than novelty items." Orson leaned back against the wall, rubbing the back of his neck. "I didn't think he'd take it that hard. He's stayed with the neighbor before. He may have perceived the absence as abandonment due to the lack of environmental cues indicating a temporary departure." "Like what?" "A calendar. Something as simple as a familiar scent on a blanket would have sufficed." Buck let out a deep sigh, eyes half-lidded. "So how do I fix it?" Orson asked. "You must re-establish consistent patterns, presence, routine, and reassurance." "He requires a reaffirmation of stability. I've been home all week." "Have you engaged in shared activities?" "We watched baseball." "Did he participate?" He barked at the umpire. Vesh paused. "That may qualify." Orson stood and began pacing. "I've got a job interview in Reno next week. If I leave again, he's gonna go nuclear. Then we must implement a transitional support strategy." "Like what?" "Therapy, controlled exposure to brief absences. Positive reinforcement upon return, familiar objects carrying your scent, perhaps an audio recording of your voice." Orson chuckled. "You want me to leave him a voicemail? It may prevent further destruction of furniture." Buck perked up slightly and rolled onto his back. Vesh approached slowly and knelt. He placed a hand on Buck's chest, feeling the slow, steady rhythm beneath the fur. "He is not broken," Vesh said. "He is confused." Orson nodded. "Aren't we all?" They spent the next 20 minutes building what Vesh called a reassociative comfort profile. Orson provided a worn flannel shirt, a pair of socks that hadn't seen the inside of a washing machine in 2 days, and a recording of him reading the opening chapter of a Western paperback. Vesh uploaded the audio to a small orb that emitted sound in subtle pulses. When activated, it sounded like Orson was telling a story from the other room. Buck immediately stopped pacing and curled up beside the orb. "There," Orson said. "That's the first time he's laid down in hours." Vesh recorded the results. "We will monitor his response over the next few days. If symptoms persist, we may consider low-dose anxiolytics. Doggy antidepressants, formulated specifically for canid neurochemistry." Orson shook his head. "He's just a dog. I didn't think they got like this. He is not just anything." Orson looked down at Buck, who was now softly snoring. "No, he isn't." Vesh stood and returned the tools to the drawer. "You may leave him here overnight if you wish. We will continue reinforcement intervals. I'll stay. There is a cot in the observation alcove." Orson settled in as Buck shifted slightly, one paw resting against the base of the orb. At dawn, Vesh entered quietly, a steaming cup in each hand. "He slept through the night," he said. "So did I." They both watched Buck twitch in his dreams, ears flicking. "When I first met you," Vesh said, "I believed your species to be reckless, chaotic, not wrong, but not complete." Orson sipped the warm drink. "What changed?" "You showed me that chaos and care can coexist." Buck snorted, then farted gently. Orson raised his cup. "To coexistence," Vesh nodded. "To trust." They stayed a while longer until Buck woke, stretched, and trotted over to press his head firmly into Orson's knee. Everything that needed fixing had been fixed.